Dr. Jaxon Hayes pressed his palm against the cool viewport of Kepler Station's medical wing, watching the massive Zephyrian transport dock with mechanical precision. After 18 months as the station's chief medical officer, he'd grown accustomed to treating various alien species, but today marked something special, the first joint medical training exercise between human and Zephyrian medical students. "Still can't believe they agreed to this," muttered resident Dr. Sam Rodriguez, adjusting his surgical scrubs nervously. "I mean, their medical technology is supposedly centuries ahead of ours." Jaxon turned from the window, his weathered face showing the kind of confidence that came from 20 years of emergency medicine on Earth's most dangerous colonies. "Technology isn't everything, Sam. Sometimes the old ways work just fine." The airlock hissed open, and 3 Zephyrian students glided in. Their crystalline exoskeletons caught the station's artificial light, creating prismatic rainbows across the sterile walls. Each stood nearly 8 feet tall, their 4 arms ending in delicate manipulator appendages that could perform microsurgery with inhuman precision. The lead student, whose translation collar identified him as HFY, approached with fluid movements. "Greetings, human Dr. Hayes. We are honored to participate in this primitive," he paused, his collar recalibrating, "traditional learning experience." Sam shot Jaxon a look, but the older doctor simply smiled. "Welcome aboard, HFY. I hope you're ready to get your hands dirty. Metaphorically speaking, our manipulator appendages are equipped with microfiltration systems that prevent contamination," replied another student, Kethmore. "We do not understand this expression about dirt." "You will," Jaxon said under his breath. The medical bay doors slid open, revealing their first patient, a Terran construction worker named David Kim, who'd suffered a plasma torch accident. His chest rose and fell in labored breaths, multiple burns covering his torso. "Standard plasma burn treatment protocol," HFY announced, his 4 arms moving in perfect synchronization as he activated a hovering medical scanner. "Nanite cellular reconstruction, followed by biosynthetic skin grafting. Patient will be fully healed in 4.7 hours. Jaxon nodded appreciatively at the advanced diagnostic display. "Impressive. But let's start with basics. Stabilize his breathing and circulation first." The Zephyrians exchanged what might have been confused glances. It was hard to tell with their compound eyes. "Dr. Hayes," Kethmore interjected politely, "our preliminary scans indicate no cardiopulmonary distress. The burns are localized and non-critical to primary life functions." "Sam, what do you see?" Jaxon asked his resident. Sam approached the patient, placing his hands on David's chest and neck, feeling for pulse and breathing rhythm. Rapid, shallow breathing. Pulse is thready and weak. He's going into shock. "Confirmed," Jaxon said. "The trauma response is affecting his entire system, not just the burn sites." HFY's scanner beeped insistently. "Our instruments detect no systemic failures. The human's vital signs are within acceptable parameters for continued function." "Acceptable isn't optimal," Jaxon replied, quickly preparing in 4-line. "In human medicine, we treat the patient, not just the injury." As they worked, Jaxon couldn't help but notice the Zephyrians' confusion at what they considered primitive diagnostic methods. Actually touching the patient, listening with stethoscopes, making visual assessments. Their technology was undoubtedly superior, but something about their approach felt distant. "There," Jaxon said as David's color improved following the 4 fluids and mild sedation. "Now we can address the burns." The Zephyrian nanite treatment was indeed miraculous. David's burns disappeared as if they'd never existed. But Jaxon noticed something that the scanners had missed. A slight irregularity in the patient's heartbeat that only became apparent during the stress of recovery. HFY, run a deep cardiac scan. "Unnecessary. Patient is fully recovered." "Humor me." The scan revealed a minor congenital defect that had gone unnoticed David's entire life, one that could have caused sudden cardiac death under the right circumstances. "How did you detect this?" Kethmore asked, his voice carrying a note of genuine curiosity. "Experience, intuition, and the willingness to look beyond what the machines tell us." As the Zephyrian students processed this information, Jaxon wondered if their advanced technology had perhaps made them overly dependent on their instruments. Still, he had to admit their nanite healing was beyond anything human medicine could achieve. "Tomorrow we'll work on a more complex case," Jaxon announced. "I think you'll find human resilience quite interesting." The next morning brought an emergency that would test everyone's skills. Captain Torres burst through the medical bay doors, his security uniform torn and bloody. "Doc, we've got a problem. Mining accident on level 7. Jake Morrison took a direct hit from a containment field collapse. He's in bad shape." Jaxon was already moving, grabbing his emergency kit. "Sam, prep the trauma bay. HFY, bring your team." The Zephyrian students followed, their movements precise but somehow lacking the urgency that drove the human medics. They arrived at the accident scene to find Jake unconscious beneath a twisted mass of metal debris. His left arm was completely crushed, and his chest showed signs of severe internal trauma. "Massive hemorrhaging," Sam reported, his scanner painting a grim picture. "Multiple organ damage, severe blood loss. We need to get him to surgery now." HFY's forearms danced across his advanced medical scanner. "Survival probability, 12.3%. Recommend immediate termination of suffering protocols." "Like hell," Jaxon snarled, already applying pressure bandages. "We don't give up on our people." "Dr. Hayes," Kethmore said gently, "our calculations are precise. The human's injuries are incompatible with continued existence. To proceed would be cruel." "Your calculations don't account for human stubbornness," Jaxon replied, helping to load Jake onto the emergency stretcher. "Sam, type and cross-match for surgery. We're going to need a lot of blood." Back in the trauma bay, the extent of Jake's injuries became clear. The Zephyrian students watched in fascination as Jaxon and Sam worked with what they considered primitive tools, scalpels, sutures, and manual procedures that seemed impossibly crude compared to their nanite reconstruction techniques. "Why do you not use cellular regeneration protocols?" HFY asked as Jaxon manually clamped a severed artery. "Because sometimes the old-fashioned way is the only way that works," Jaxon grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. "Your nanites are amazing, but they can't replace what's completely destroyed. They can only work with what's already there." For 6 hours, they battled to save Jake's life. The Zephyrians' technology proved invaluable for detailed tissue repair and organ support, but it was human determination and improvisation that kept the patient alive long enough for their advanced healing to take effect. "Remarkable," Kethmore observed as Jake's vital signs finally stabilized. "Your species' refusal to accept logical outcomes appears to have medical applications." "We call it hope," Sam said, exhaustion clear in his voice. "An inefficient emotional response that somehow produces superior results," HFY mused. "Fascinating." Jake survived the night, his body slowly healing with the aid of Zephyrian nanites guided by human surgical skill. But as they worked together over the following days, Jaxon began to notice something troubling about his alien colleagues. They were brilliant, their technology was miraculous, but they seemed to lack something essential: the ability to fight for a patient beyond what their calculations deemed reasonable. They treated medicine like an equation to be solved rather than a battle to be won. "Tell me about Zephyrian medical training," Jaxon asked HFY during a quiet moment. "We study for 12 cycles, learning to interface with our medical systems. The technology performs the healing. We simply guide its application." "What about when the technology fails?" "It does not fail. Our systems have achieved 99.97% reliability across all standard medical procedures. And the other 0.03%? HFY's crystalline features remained impassive. Those cases are classified as incompatible with continued existence." Jaxon felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. "So you just let them die?" "We ease their passing. It is more humane than prolonging inevitable suffering." "But what if it's not inevitable? What if there's something your scanners can't detect? Some way to save them that your computers haven't calculated?" The question seemed to disturb HFY in a way that Jaxon hadn't expected. "Such scenarios are statistically insignificant. Tell that to Jake Morrison." The third day of the exchange program brought their greatest challenge yet. Lieutenant Alex Chin, not the Chun they'd avoided naming, but a different officer entirely, was brought in following a severe reaction to alien atmospheric processors. His lungs were filled with crystalline deposits that were slowly suffocating him. Interesting pathology, HFY observed, his scanners working overtime. The silicate structures are interfering with oxygen exchange at the alveolar level. Can your nanites clear it? Jaxon asked, already preparing for the worst. Negative. The crystalline matrix is incompatible with our dissolution protocols. Our nanites cannot differentiate between the foreign deposits and natural lung tissue crystalline structures. Kethmore's scanner chimed ominously. Patient's oxygen saturation dropping rapidly. Recommend palliative care protocols. There has to be another way, Sam insisted, checking Alex's vitals manually. What about mechanical extraction? Impossible. The third Zephyrian student, Zindel, stated flatly. The deposits are too numerous and deeply embedded. Any attempt at physical removal would cause catastrophic lung damage. Jaxon studied the scans, his mind racing. The crystalline deposits formed a complex network throughout Alex's lungs, beautiful in their geometric precision but deadly in their efficiency. Standard medical procedures would indeed be useless here. What if we don't remove them? He said suddenly. Dr. Hayes. Sam looked confused. What if we work around them? Make them part of the solution instead of the problem? The Zephyrian's compound eyes focused on him with laser intensity. Elaborate, please. Jaxon moved to Alex's bedside, his hands already working as he spoke. These crystals are forming a network. What if we could use that network to our advantage? Create pathways for oxygen that bypass the damaged alveoli. Theoretically possible, HFY admitted slowly, but it would require precise manipulation of lung tissue at the cellular level while maintaining structural integrity. Our systems are not programmed for such improvisation. Then we do it manually. Manually. Kethmore's voice carried disbelief. Dr. Hayes, the precision required would be beyond human capability. The slightest error would be fatal. Maybe. But Alex is going to die anyway if we don't try. What followed was the most delicate surgery Jaxon had ever attempted. Using a combination of human surgical techniques and Zephyrian precision tools, he began to carefully restructure Alex's lung tissue, creating new pathways for oxygen exchange that incorporated the crystalline deposits rather than fighting them. The Zephyrians watched in fascination as Jaxon worked entirely by feel and instinct, making decisions that their computers would never have suggested. His hands moved with surprising grace, guided not by scanners or calculations, but by decades of experience and an intuitive understanding of human physiology. Your approach lacks scientific foundation, HFY observed, but his tone carried curiosity rather than criticism. Sometimes you have to trust your gut, Jaxon replied, carefully suturing a modified air passage. Medicine isn't always about following protocols. Hours passed. Alex's oxygen levels fluctuated wildly as Jaxon worked, each modification to his lung structure a gamble that could save or kill him. The Zephyrian scanners provided crucial feedback, but the decisions, the creative leaps that turned impossible problems into workable solutions, came from human intuition. There, Jaxon finally said, stepping back from the surgical table. Sam, check his O2 sats. The numbers on the monitor began to climb. 70%, 80%, 85%, finally stabilizing at 92%, not perfect but compatible with life. Remarkable, Zindel breathed. Our models predicted a 0.003% chance of success for your approach. Your models don't account for human stubbornness. Sam grinned, echoing Jaxon's earlier words. Alex survived, his modified lung structure actually proving more efficient than his original anatomy in the station's artificial atmosphere. But the real victory was the look of wonder in the Zephyrian students' compound eyes as they realized that sometimes, the most advanced technology in the universe was no substitute for experience, intuition, and the refusal to accept defeat. We have much to learn from your species, HFY admitted privately to Jaxon later that evening. And we have much to learn from yours, Jaxon replied. Maybe that's the point. Day 4 brought a crisis that would push everyone to their absolute limits. A shuttle accident in the asteroid belt resulted in multiple casualties, but one case stood out immediately. Commander Ryan Blake, the shuttle's pilot, had suffered massive trauma when his craft's emergency systems failed. Multiple system failures, Sam reported as they rushed Blake into the trauma bay. Severe head injury, massive internal bleeding, and... He paused, checking his readings again. His heart stopped 3 minutes ago. The Zephyrian scanners confirmed the grim assessment. No detectable neural activity, HFY reported. Cardiac function, 0. Cellular death has begun. This human has expired. Not yet, he hasn't, Jaxon said grimly, immediately beginning CPR compressions. Dr. Hayes, Kethmore interjected gently. Our scans show irreversible brain damage. Even if cardiac function could be restored, the neurological damage would be incompatible with meaningful existence. Jaxon didn't stop his compressions. Sam, get the defibrillator ready. We're not giving up. But the brain damage, Zindel began, might not be as bad as your scanners think. Jaxon cut him off. Human brains are more resilient than most species realize. We can survive longer periods of oxygen deprivation and still recover full function. The defibrillator charged with its familiar whine. Clear. Blake's body jolted with the electrical shock, but his heart remained silent. Again, Jaxon ordered, resuming compressions. Dr. Hayes, HFY said quietly, we have observed your species' remarkable tenacity, but there are limits. This human's injuries exceed even your impressive recovery capabilities. Clear. Another shock. Still nothing. The Zephyrians exchanged what might have been meaningful looks. Perhaps it would be more merciful, Kethmore began. Mercy is letting him fight as long as he wants to fight. Jaxon snarled, sweat dripping onto Blake's chest as he continued compressions. Sam, check for internal bleeding sources. We need to stop the hemorrhaging before we can get his heart going. For the next 30 minutes, they battled against death itself. The Zephyrians' nanites sealed internal injuries with miraculous efficiency, but Blake's heart remained stubbornly still. Every few minutes, they would try the defibrillator again, hoping for a response that never came. Dr. Hayes, HFY finally said, his voice carrying unusual emotion. Your dedication is admirable, but surely you must recognize when the battle is lost. Jaxon looked up from the compressions, his arms aching from the continuous effort. How long has he been down now? 42 minutes, Sam reported quietly. 42 minutes. Your scanners say he's dead, right? Correct. All measurable life signs have ceased. Then we have nothing to lose by continuing. What the Zephyrians witnessed over the next hour would become legend in their medical schools. Jaxon refused to stop, his compressions becoming almost mechanical in their consistency. Sam assisted with medications and monitoring, while the alien students watched in fascination as human medicine became less about technology and more about sheer stubborn will. Why do you persist? HFY asked during a brief pause for defibrillation. Because somebody has to, Jaxon replied simply. Because giving up is easy, and saving lives is hard. Because every person deserves someone who won't stop fighting for them. At the 57-minute mark, Blake's heart suddenly lurched back to life. The Zephyrian scanners went wild with activity as Blake's vital signs flickered back into existence. His pulse was weak and irregular, but it was there. Impossible, Kethmore breathed. Improbable, Jaxon corrected, finally allowing himself to step back. But not impossible. Never impossible. Blake's recovery was slow and uncertain. The Zephyrians' advanced healing technology helped repair the physical damage, but it was human nursing care that guided him through the critical first days. Jaxon and Sam took turns monitoring him around the clock, watching for signs of brain function that their alien colleagues insisted couldn't exist. On the third day after the accident, Blake opened his eyes and asked for water. Full neurological recovery, Sam reported in amazement. No detectable cognitive impairment. The Zephyrians stared at their scanners in disbelief. Our instruments indicated irreversible brain death, Zindel said slowly. Your instruments were wrong, Jaxon replied. Or maybe they just don't understand human physiology as well as they thought. But how is this possible? Our medical databases contain physiological data for over 3,000 species. Humans should not be able to survive such trauma. Jaxon shrugged. Maybe that's what makes us human. We survive things we shouldn't survive. We fight when logic says we should give up. We find ways to keep going when every rational calculation says we should stop. The final day of the medical exchange brought unexpected visitors to Kepler Station. A Zephyrian medical council had arrived to observe the joint training program, their crystalline forms glittering with official insignia. We have reviewed the reports from our students, announced the lead counselor, whose translation collar identified him as High Healer Morthak. The claims seem improbable. Which claims would those be? Jaxon asked politely. That human medical techniques can achieve success rates that exceed our technological capabilities. That primitive manual procedures can save patients our systems classify as deceased. Vexhai stepped forward. His forearms moving in what Jaxon had learned was a gesture of respect. High Healer, I have witnessed these achievements personally. The human medical protocols operate on principles our science does not fully understand. Emotional decision-making and illogical persistence are not medical principles, Morthak replied coldly. Maybe not, Jaxon said. But they work. The council demanded a demonstration. By unfortunate coincidence, the station's emergency klaxons began blaring just as the meeting convened. Multiple casualties incoming. Captain Torres reported over the comm transport ship collision near the outer docks. We've got 17 injured, 3 critical. The medical bay erupted into controlled chaos as casualties flooded in. Jaxon found himself working alongside the Zephyrian Council, their advanced scanners and healing technology proving invaluable for the less seriously injured patients. But the 3 critical cases presented a familiar dilemma. This human has extensive spinal trauma, High Healer Morthak announced, his scanners analyzing a young engineer named Daniel Park. Permanent paralysis is certain. Quality of life will be severely compromised. This one has severe neurological damage, another council member reported. Cognitive function is likely to be permanently impaired. The 3rd critical patient, an elderly maintenance worker named George Santos, had suffered cardiac arrest and showed minimal brain activity. Recommend comfort care protocols for all 3, Morthak stated. Their injuries are incompatible with meaningful existence. Define meaningful, Jaxon said quietly, already moving toward Daniel's bedside. Dr. Hayes, the High Healer's voice carried warning. Do not let your emotional attachments cloud your medical judgment. My medical judgment tells me that these people deserve a chance to decide for themselves what constitutes a meaningful life. What followed was a masterclass in human medical tenacity. Working together, Jaxon, Sam, and the 3 student Zephyrians combined cutting-edge alien technology with stubborn human determination. They rebuilt Daniel's shattered spine using nanite reconstruction guided by human surgical intuition. They coaxed damaged neural pathways back to life with a combination of advanced healing and old-fashioned physical therapy. George Santos proved the most challenging case. His heart had stopped for over 20 minutes before reaching the medical bay, and the Zephyrian scanners showed no detectable brain activity. This is futile, High Healer Morthak declared after watching Jaxon perform CPR for 15 minutes. The human is deceased. No, Vexhai said suddenly, surprising everyone. We have learned that human physiology does not always conform to our understanding. Dr. Hayes has shown us that persistence beyond logical parameters can yield unexpected results. The young Zephyrian student moved to assist with the resuscitation, his forearms working in perfect coordination with Jaxon's compressions. Kethmore and Zindel joined them, their advanced technology working to support the manual efforts. This is highly irregular, Morthak protested. So is saving lives that everyone else has given up on, Sam replied, never pausing in his medication preparations. They worked for over an hour. The Zephyrian Council watched in growing amazement as human and alien medical techniques merged into something greater than either could achieve alone. George's heart finally responded to the defibrillator, his pulse weak but steady. All 3 critical patients not only survived but eventually made full recoveries. Daniel Park returned to duty with full mobility. The neurologically damaged patient regained complete cognitive function. George Santos not only recovered but lived another 15 years, becoming something of a legend on Kepler Station. How do you explain these results? High Healer Morthak asked during the closing ceremony. Jaxon considered the question carefully. I think it comes down to this: we don't just treat the injury or the illness. We treat the person. And people are tougher than any scanner can measure. Your techniques appear to incorporate non-quantifiable variables. The High Healer mused. Hope, determination, the refusal to accept defeat. Yeah, those are pretty hard to quantify. Vexhai approached Jaxon as the Zephyrian delegation prepared to depart. Dr. Hayes, I have a request. Would you be willing to establish a permanent exchange program? Our medical students would benefit greatly from learning your non-quantifiable techniques. And our students could learn from your technology, Jaxon replied. I think that sounds like a pretty good deal. The High Healer overheard the conversation. Perhaps, he said slowly, there is wisdom in combining our precision with your persistence. Just remember, Jaxon said with a smile, sometimes the most important medical instrument you have is the refusal to give up. As the Zephyrian transport departed Kepler Station, Sam joined Jaxon at the viewport. Think they learned anything? I think they learned that having the most advanced technology in the galaxy doesn't mean much if you don't have the heart to use it when everything looks hopeless. And us? What did we learn? Jaxon watched the transport disappear into the star field. That there's always room to improve, always something new to learn. But some things, the determination to fight for every patient, the refusal to accept that anyone is beyond saving, those things are what make us human. And that's not such a bad thing to be. No, Jaxon agreed, turning back toward the medical bay where new patients always waited. That's not such a bad thing to be at all.